Welcome to Happy Homes and Gardens. I'm your host. My name is Daphne Royce. I am a real estate broker, architecture, and interior designer. Green Gables Estate is one of the largest and most magnificent estates in California. Situated in Central Woodside in the heart of Silicon Valley on 74 acres, the estate contains 7 homes, 3 swimming pools, a Roman pool, lily ponds, tennis courts, and rolling hills, and is rich in the history of 5 generations of family. Please welcome Marc Fleishhacker, a co-owner of Green Gables, to share some insights with us.
Thank you.
Please tell us about yourself and the history of this beautiful Green Gables estate.
So I grew up every summer of my youth through university at Green Gables. Green Gables is about a 45-minute drive south of San Francisco. And my family, every summer since I was born, would move to Green Gables roughly around the 1st of June. And we would stay there full-time until school began, usually soon after Labor Day in early September. But Green Gables is really the historic family compound, the word that many people like to use now, of my family going back to the early 1900s. My great-grandfather, a man named Marc Fleishhacker, decided he wanted to build a place for his family to gather in the summer. Many people have asked, why did he want to build this magnificent estate? And the primary answers are two. For those of you who know San Francisco in the summer, it's a cold, windy, and foggy city. And he, like many people, wanted to get out of the fog and into the warm California sunshine. And you can do that pretty easily if you just move 20, 30 minutes away from San Francisco. So he wanted to be warm, he wanted an estate, and he didn't want to go to his in-laws' house because his wife, my great-grandmother Bella Gerstel Fleishhacker, had a family in Marin County to the north of San Francisco in a city called San Rafael. And back then, there was no famous Golden Gate Bridge that was built some 25 years later. And you had to take the ferry to get there. And a lot of those ferries were people, horses, and then slowly but surely more cars. So he went with his driver every day for a summer, driving south from San Francisco until he found an area where he noticed that the fog did not stay long. It might burn off at 9:30 or 10 in the morning. And he started exploring land available for purchase. And he settled on this town of Woodside, which today, yes, is in the heart of Silicon Valley. But back then, we didn't refer to the area as Silicon Valley. It was referred to as the Peninsula. And families from San Francisco looked for places to go and be warm and enjoy the summer. So my family has therefore been living, I guess now almost 115 years in Woodside. And to this day, the family lives on the estate every summer. When I grew up there, there were cousins in different houses, grandparents in the main house. And as you mentioned, Daphne, there are 7 homes on the property. A few of them were occupied by gardeners and people who took care of the estate. But for me, it was what we did in the summer. There was no question of what are we doing this year? Are we going away? We went to Woodside. And to us, Woodside meant Green Gables.
Not many people can spend summers in such a unique estate in the heart of Silicon Valley. How have you spent your summer there? What is your best memory?
So as a child, the way I spent my time was exploring. 74 acres is a lot of land, but to a young child, it seems like it's as big as the world. And I explored every inch of this estate. Got my proper share of thorns, poison oak, nettles, explored the deer, the squirrels. For me, it was literally like living in a park. And that's what I did as a kid. And then I would often hang out with the gardener who would take care of the estate. And I learned about things like irrigation systems and how we collect water in a big reservoir. My great-grandfather started an organization or a company called the Pacific Power Company, a precursor to today's Pacific Gas and Electric. And so we even have a dam and a reservoir. It doesn't produce power. It collects something perhaps even more valuable today, which is water. So as a kid, I was an explorer. As a teenager, frankly, I was a partier. And if you want to party, Green Gables is a great place to do it. You can do it discreetly or not, because there's so much room, with 3 swimming pools, with a Roman pool that is 100 yards long, with a lawn that's bigger than a football field, where I played Frisbee and baseball and did all kinds of sports. It was endless what I could do. And the main swimming pool, which is a very large pool that was built in, I think, in 1923 or 24, apparently the first free-form swimming pool built in California, because it has an unusual shape, was where we would spend much of our days in the hot afternoons in July and August. And it was there where I learned to swim. We had boat battles and wars that we'd reenact. And it was an ongoing series of fun. But as I got a little bit older, Woodside became the place where I would come home from the summers after I attended university on the East Coast. And the only theme that was consistent throughout all of this was my wonderful relationship with my grandparents. My grandparents lived in what we call the big house, the main house on the property, as my grandfather's parents had lived there before him, and he actually grew up in his summers in that same home. My father grew up in his summers in that same home. And then the estate expanded, and there started to be homes for the individual families. And I had amazing experiences with my grandparents. Every Sunday, I would go to brunch in their house. We would sit out on the beautiful terrace with the incredible view of what are called the Western Hills of the Santa Cruz Mountains. There was a butler, there was a houseboy, there was a maid, there was a cook, there was a cook's assistant. And these people waited on us. It was like living, I guess people would say it sounds a bit like Downton Abbey. And I would say it probably was. I didn't know any better as a kid. I thought this was normal. I would run into the kitchen and the cook would sneak me fresh baked goodies. My grandmother would make wonderful dill pickles in the summer. And it was just this constant coming and going of interesting people. One of the really interesting historical facts of the estate is that the United Nations actually chose to celebrate its 20th birthday or anniversary where it was founded, which was in San Francisco in 1945. Many people think it must have been founded in New York, but indeed it was founded, I think, at the Fairmont Hotel in 1945 as the outcome of a big conference. But when they decided to celebrate their 20th anniversary, they chose Green Gables as the place for the big gala dinner. We had every single leading world dignitary on the estate. As a child, and then growing up, it was not uncommon for me to meet the Prince of Sweden, the king of another country, an ambassador to Italy, consulates from Japan. It just literally never stopped meeting incredibly interesting people, all of whom were somehow connected to my grandparents primarily, and also to my parents. So it was fun. It was a place to play. It was a place to party. We had amazing parties there, weddings. I myself was married there. 74 acres, 3 swimming pools, endless gardens and places. There's a lot to do.
What was the biggest party there?
The biggest party I'm familiar with, it was actually an event that we held with a company that makes phones and computers and has a spaceship-shaped headquarters in Cupertino, California. I'll let the audience decide what company that might have been. And they actually rented out the estate to celebrate a internal event, a company picnic, if you will. And we had, I think, 1,400 people on the estate. That seems like a really big number because in many ways it is. What was not surprising to me, but rather remarkable nevertheless, was that 1,400 people did not make it be crowded. it's a big place. And between the main lawns and the Roman pool and the steps leading down to this Roman pool, there was plenty of room for 1,400 people to have a good time. As a family, as a private event, for many years, we would have, and the 4th of July party was usually held every other year. And when we would build the invitation list, the criteria was invite everybody you know. And so between my family and my aunt's family and my uncle's family, that would usually around 500, 600 people who would actually come. We'd invite more, but 500 or 600 would show up. And that too was not uncommon. But most events, most parties, most gatherings were 20 or 30 people enjoying this remarkable, peaceful setting. And frankly, what I still believe to this day is maybe the world's best climate, because Woodside has, I think, the perfect climate. It's never too hot. It's never too cold. You don't need air conditioning. At night, the cool breezes from the coast take the temperature down to the low 60s. It's frankly a wonderful place to live because the weather is perfect.
Can you tell me how much has changed since the place from your childhood to now?
Not that much. I like to say that great states evolve, and Green Gables certainly has evolved from originally the main house and some scattered buildings out on the periphery of the estate when my great-grandfather bought the land. It's changed a lot. Today there's 7 homes. Back then there might have been 3. 2 of those homes that were there at the time went through significant remodeling and expansion. When I was born in 1962, there was, since then, only one major home has been added, and that is what we call the Oak Grove House, I believe we call it. It's my Uncle David's house, and that was built in 1972. But for the most part, the estate has stayed the same. We've added some swimming pools to houses. We've changed some of the landscaping to be more drought resistant and more deer resistant. So maybe drought tolerant and deer resistant is right. But the estate at times is like going back in time. You could be living in a different era. The natural beauty is something to be preserved, not to be changed. The original architects were a mixture of interior and exterior design and landscape architects, 2 brothers that did complete projects, Charles and Henry Green. And as a result of that, the entire landscaping of the main part of the house was defined in incredible detail by the original architects, including planting of small trees that today are 100 years old. Incredible sequoia tree, beautiful deodora pines. There's plenty of beautiful California oak, which can live for many, many years, as we know. And so the estate has changed through the growth of trees and plants. At times we cut trees, we trim trees. Sometimes they fall down because all trees sooner or later die. But the estate has remained remarkably consistent. My job as manager of the estate, as I've always thought that I was a steward. I was somebody to take care of this amazing place for a period of time. No one lives forever. This was created by a remarkable visionary man, my great-grandfather. I never had the privilege to meet him. But I think in honoring him and honoring how I enjoyed the estate as a child, my job as an adult has been to make sure that it's taken care of and frankly enjoyed by my generation of the family. And now, as it has been from time to time, enjoyed by my children's generation as they're getting older.
Have the main house been renovated in the past?
Main house has been significantly renovated twice since it was built in I think it was first opened for the use in the summer in 1911. So that's 113 years ago. And it was expanded to include what today we call the card room, which is arguably the most beautiful room in the house. A really museum quality room where the furniture and the carvings in the room were not only designed by the architect, but actually crafted by the architect. I think it was Charles Green, who literally with scalpel and hammer carved the chairs, carved the panels and the walls, the perhaps ultimate expression of the craftsman movement. The kitchen was dramatically remodeled in the late 50s. In fact, the kitchen to this day looks like it was built in the 1950s and would probably be remodeled by the next owner of Green Gables. It's highly functional, but it doesn't look like the kitchens of 2024. The appliances are not from the 50s. So the house has had some sun decks turned into rooms, but the original lines of the house, the ceilings, the floors, the window locations and placement are all exactly the way they were built back 111 years ago.
Everything seems so spread out on the 74 acres estate. How did you get from building to building or around the property?
Well, first of all, as you know, in California and Woodside, we're blessed with a good climate. So it's not like you're constantly having to dodge the rain. There are those rainy days. Sometimes it feels like a monsoon, but those are the exception. And so most of the time, as a child, it was on my bicycle. It's where I learned to ride a bicycle, and I would speed around the estate, and I'd go down to one cousin's house and over to another cousin's house, and then up to the swimming pool. And then my father and mother couldn't ever find me and my sisters, so they put in a very loud ship's bell on the property. This was, of course, prior to cell phones taking over our lives. And so there was no way to get in touch with us. So they would ring this very loud bell, and we knew we had to go home. But so it started out as using a bicycle. There are two primary roads on the property that connect the homes, so you can walk on the roads, as many people do, but there are also many paths. The architects, again, were also landscape designers, and so they developed many interconnecting paths from one home to the other. And so you can easily get around the estate by a combination of the roads and paths that are there. Of course, as I mentioned, I like to explore. And so then it was, hiking boots, jeans, and going up into the hills and into the woods and down into the creek. And like I said, I got my share of poison oak over the years, but that was the way to get around. It's also where I learned to drive a car. It's where I had my first car accident. Luckily, it was between me and a tree that was closer than I thought it was. But when you have an estate with two private roads, you can actually have the luxury of learning to drive without necessarily crashing into other people. So there's always a way to get around, but usually I would say even to this day, you walk. And walking is a pretty healthy, yeah.
That would take a long time to walk.
Depends where you're going. I mean, if you're in a hurry to leave the estate, you get in your car or your bicycle, right? Woodside is connected to an incredible series of bicycle paths and roads in our community. Palo Alto with Stanford University is a very bike pro culture, and Cañada Road, which goes from Woodside north to the San Andreas Reservoirs and the Crystal Springs Lakes, is an incredibly beautiful bike ride and not too difficult to run with its own dedicated bike path. So it's an amazing area to bicycle around. There are hills, and for those people who are serious, you can bicycle over to the Pacific Ocean if you're really a serious biker. Every weekend, there are many people who do it. But within the estate, if you're in a big hurry, I have driven from one house to the other, but you don't have to. Leave 5-10 minutes earlier and walk. It's healthier.
Did you ever have horses live on the property?
Horses have lived on the property for quite some time. Horses live on the property today. Adjacent to one of the homes on the eastern edge of the estate, we have a stables and a tack room where currently there are 2 homes. As we've been talking to people about the sale of the estate, there have been significant interest in developing what I like to call an equestrian center. There's plenty of space for a beautiful equestrian ring. We have the old barn that was used for livestock and animals and served to provide milk and such things to the family during World War II when there was rationing. And that barn could be expanded and would be an absolutely wonderful stables, I think, for maybe 8 to 10 horses. But there are horses today. And then a number of years ago, I'm going to say close to 20, our family dedicated a horse trail easement that runs along the western boundary of the property. And this was dedicated to use by, I think it's called the Woodside Trail Club. And the members of the trail club are given a key and they open a little gate and they ride through the western boundary of the property. As we've said, it's 74 acres. We never see them. We know they're there, or we know they go there. It's a nice benefit for them because it enables people to go through different properties and connect on a nice long horse ride. It doesn't impede on the use of the property because we don't see, hear, or smell them. But Woodside's a very equestrian community, and Green Gables is actually connected to that life.
Have your grandparents always have a vegetable garden there?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, always. I don't know what happened long before I was there. Certainly in my grandparents' life, but I'm pretty sure in my great-grandparents' life, we had 2 major gardens that were not just for looking at, but were producing, because there's very beautiful gardens just for the aesthetic beauty. But adjacent to the core of the estate is an area very close to the house I grew up in, which we called the vegetable and flower garden. They used to be 2 separate gardens close to one another. Now they're a single, rather large, I would say probably, roughly speaking, maybe close to half an acre, vegetable and flower garden. We have roses, many of them, of different colors and species that are incredible heirloom roses that have been established there and continue to be cultivated, that occupy about 25% of the garden. And then there's a mixture of dahlias and all kinds of flowering plants. And every year we plant numerous vegetables so that the gardens are used to actually provide food and flowers to the family. It used to be that twice a week, the head gardener would cut the flowers from this cutting flower garden and bring them in these large tin containers to the main house. I mentioned that there was a butler. The butler's job was to then take those flowers into the flower preparation room, which exists in the main house, and create beautiful flower arrangements that would then be filling up the home with the beauty grown on the estate. In the same way, the main gardener would be cultivating the green beans, the corn, the zucchini squash, the tomatoes, the different lettuces, the bell peppers, and when they got ripe, would be bringing them to each of the homes 2 or 3 times a week. And then, of course, as the world got a bit more modern, we ourselves would go and pick the vegetables and cut the flowers. As recently as 2020, my wife and I lived for a year at the estate. We expanded those gardens, and my wife is a passionate and very, very excellent gardener. And we had salads and winter vegetables, and of course the summer vegetables as well, year round. We had flowers decorating the home year round, all because of the bounty of this incredible vegetable and flower garden. It's screened in because there are many deer in Woodside and on the estate, so the deer cannot eat all our flowers and vegetables.
How nice.
That's wonderful. It's a luxury. It's cultivating a large garden is a labor-intensive effort, and irrigating it and all the things, preparing the soil. But if you're lucky enough to do it, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing to have.
It's also called a lifestyle.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with it. And, thankfully, my wife loves to garden. And so we had the benefit of her passion there. I like to design gardens. She likes to work in them. And she says she's happiest when her hands are in the mud. So,
Do you know why your grandparents built a 300 feet long Roman pool?
I think there are 3 reasons they did it, because we've talked about that in the family. It was added 10 years, maybe 12 after the estate was first occupied, so in the early to mid 1920s. The design, the main house and its beautiful lawn and the lily pond at the end of it are a natural plateau. But just below it is this area where the Roman pool exists today. And it used to just be a promontory looking out into land. My great-grandfather felt that the gardens could naturally extend. He had been, along with my great-grandmother, someone who traveled the world, and they had seen Hadrian's villa outside of Rome, which has something called the Paleocapa, which is a long, beautiful reflecting pool with arches at the end. In the case of Hadrian's villa, they were made of white Carrara marble, whereas where our Roman pool is, it's made of chert, which is a local dark stone and much more suitable to the Woodside environment. But so on the one hand, I know they always sought beauty. They wanted beauty and tranquility. As much as I said, we've had 1,500 people at an event there and hundreds of people there during our family parties and weddings. My great-grandfather was not looking for a place to socialize with hundreds or tens and tens of people. He was looking for a place to have a peaceful summer resting life. He was a central figure in the life and business world of San Francisco. When he went to Woodside, he was looking for tranquility, and his wife, who was an artist, loved painting. And so that was a world of aesthetic beauty, and it is a reflecting pool, and it's a place for reflection.
How do you make it reflecting?
So water has some reflection qualities, but to increase its reflectability or reflective qualities, we actually add an organic dye to the pool. It's organic because there are fish in the Roman pool, and we don't want to harm them. And obviously, we don't want to introduce anything that isn't good for the environment into a large body of water. But if you have darker water in the right light, it will reflect much more. It'll seem like a black sheet of glass, so to speak. And so we, during the summer months, to increase its reflectability, we add this organic black dye, which makes the water dark. It's not actually black at the end of the day. It also cuts down on algae growth, because if you get blobs of algae in a pool, it's not attractive. So we've pretty much eliminated that. And it fulfills its role as being a reflecting pool.
What was your grandparents' plan to acquire parcels throughout the years after their first purchase in Woodside?
It was done pretty quickly. I believe that one parcel was added on a bit later to be able to do the Roman pool, because they needed a little bit more land to extend the length of that 100-yard long pool. But my great-grandfather bought most of the land, with perhaps that exception, in a few years. He wanted to create this large estate, and he went about buying all the lots to create it. And he envisioned it expanding for his family and for the next generations. So it wasn't buy the main house and then, oh, there's an opportunity to buy one. There is on the eastern edge of the estate, where there are two homes. We call them the Craftsman home and the Craftsman barn. That lot was added a little bit toward the end of the process because it at the time was on the other side of Albion Avenue, which is the main road to get to the entrance of the estate. And after my great-grandfather bought this house on the other side of the road, he got permission from the town of Woodside, and he moved the road. So that piece of property then became an integrated part of the estate.
How interesting. So the road wasn't like today, was being moved.
Yeah. And nowadays, if you say, and so then my great-grandfather moved the road, people go, he moved the road? Well, my great-grandfather was somebody who could get roads moved. And I imagine he paid for it. But yeah, he moved about 400 yards of road there. As it goes straight and curves around, it used to just go straight.
Interesting. Very interesting.
He thought big. My great-grandfather, being in the hydroelectric business with Pacific Power Company, understood the importance of water. And he actually purchased the rights to the water from the Kings Mountain watershed, which is the local mountain that is to the west of Woodside. And he built a small dam there and a pipeline, which the easement to which we still own as a family, and has the potential still to this day to bring water to the estate, which then in turn would be used to fill up our reservoir. Our reservoir fills up in an average winter without it, so we don't do that anymore. But he also saw that importance and purchased the water rights to the mountain.
I know you left California for Italy. What does Italy have that doesn't exist in California?
Well-priced red wine for sure. But no, California has great scenic beauty, unquestionably. Highway 1, Northern California, the hills around Woodside, the natural oak. I've lived in Marin County, which is extraordinarily beautiful, in Sonoma County, up in the wine country north of San Francisco. What Italy has on a scenic level is this incredible intersection of the best architecture with the best that humanity can create, and some of the most magnificent landscapes, I think, in the world. I'm very, very lucky person. I live in Tuscany. My wife and I are actually building restoring a beautiful home in an area south of Siena called Val d'Orcia, which I think is the most beautiful region of Tuscany, where you see lines of cypress trees, and then you'll see a 14th century castle and medieval buildings. And so the architecture you have in Italy combined with the landscape is, I think, rather unique. California, it's more about the landscape and less about the architecture. And Italy has, Tuscany was the center of the Renaissance, with Florence, its capital. There is a dedication to art and beauty that is perhaps unique to the world. France has some of that heritage, of course, as well. And in my wife's business, her name's Julia, and her business is Julia B, one of the leading brands in the world for the finest bedding and tablecloths and curtains and hand-designed and embroidered products. The artisans are in Italy, the incredibly talented women and men who can make these things. So for us, Italy is a place where we can run our business. It's a place where we can enjoy incredible natural beauty and also incredible beauty from the artistic heritage that's been there now for 600 years, since the beginning of the Renaissance. It's a different way of life. It's not the crazy tension of Silicon Valley or Wall Street. I've worked in Manhattan, I've worked in Silicon Valley, and Italy is not that, that's for sure. And then, of course, if you live in Italy, you can get on a plane and fly to any of European capitals in 90 minutes. And again, for the pursuit of beauty and a wonderful lifestyle, it's a nice place to live. The Roman pool is the Roman pool at Green Gables. It was clearly inspired by Italian architecture and Roman aqueducts. It looks like a Roman aqueduct at its top. Whether it was truly Hadrian's villa or something else from which the architects got their inspiration, the design of many of the parts of the landscape are clearly influenced by Italian craftsmen. The stonework done around the gardens was done by Italian craftsmen who had migrated to the United States. And then as I was growing up, Italy and the ambassador to Italy and the consul general, they were always friends of my grandmother and constantly part of the entertainment and social life. So there's always been this love of Italy in my family. I just took it a step further and moved to Italy.
Do you know why there's a lot of European influences when your grandparents designed this estate?
Well, first of all, we're, as many Americans, our families did not originate from the United States. So we're migrants, and we at times in this era, it seems that people forget that. So on my grandfather's side, we're a family of German origin from southern Germany, the area of Bavaria, Munich, and Nuremberg, and that area. On my grandmother's side, our great-grandmother's side, the Gerstel family, they were German. On my grandmother's side, her family came from Poland. My mother is French. I have two Italian children. And so we are a family that has always understood its roots. Pioneering family, the Fleishhacker family moved to San Francisco during the gold rush of 1849, 1850, as many people moved to California and San Francisco looking for riches and fame. But most people in this family have had, the travel bug and have had the fortune to travel for extended period of times to other parts of the world. And that just was a natural part of the mindset with which I grew up. My grandparents and my great-grandparents would go on very long journeys to other parts of the world and bring back with them memories and furniture and art. And I grew up surrounded by these stimuli, which were not just American.
Very interesting. You and your wife are finding and purchasing homes for people from United States in Tuscany and Umbria. Please tell us what kind of home is available for buyers in Italy.
There are a lot of homes available in Italy because Italians are the classic example of cash poor and property rich people. And their homes, many of the beautiful ones, and there are many beautiful homes in Italy, have at times suffered from a lack of maintenance, and families who at a certain point say, we have to sell this house, we have to sell this little castle, we have to sell this villa, this farmhouse, because they don't have the means to really take proper care of it. So, there's the movie that came out years ago, Under the Tuscan Sun. There's this dream of moving to Italy and buying a farmhouse and restoring it to its splendor. And that dream absolutely persists. So there is everything you would possibly want. You have to have the courage to know how to fix it up, or know people who know how to fix a house up, because it's not going to be probably in the condition you want. The number of turnkey houses is a fraction of the total market. Like everywhere else in the world where there are beautiful places, the most beautiful places never have enough inventory. In Italy, you cannot build on land in places like Tuscany where there are not houses today. So you can't add houses. You can simply purchase a home where there is one today. There are ruins that you can still purchase. Some people try to charge too much for it. The home purchase price in Italy can be a nightmare. I've lived in Italy on and off as an adult for over 20 years. I've seen the nightmares. They're countless. We could talk for hours about the craziness of buying a home in Italy, which is not a transparent process. And indeed, that's what gave birth to part of our business now, which is to help often Americans, almost always foreigners for sure, find homes that meet their criteria, help them understand how to purchase them safely, how to avoid buying something that's illegal, how to avoid buying a house where you find out half the house shouldn't even be there and isn't registered on the public database because people have built abusive spaces and rooms. And if that has happened, how to overcome that as well. And then my wife, who, like you, is a very talented designer, she helps our clients remodel and redesign their homes with incredible artistic flair, but also what I would say is modern convenience. Frankly, European appliances are better than most American appliances. And so the quality that you can have in a home in Italy is very high. Even if it's an old farmhouse, you can have phenomenal windows and phenomenal doors and airtight spaces and excellent heating systems. There's no difference in the quality. In fact, I think the quality in Europe of tradesmen, of people who build houses, of people who lay floors, of people who paint, is much higher. These trades are really respected and well-trained. The carpenters here are amazing. You have to know how to deal with them. You have to understand the Italian culture of how you do business and how you negotiate. But it's hard to redesign and build homes in Northern California too, because there's always this, my contractor did this and he didn't show up. Those same problems can happen here. I just know how to deal with them because I've lived here so long. But there are, from a beautiful apartment we are remodeling in the center of Florence, that's in a Renaissance building that's 700 years old, to The home I'm in today, which happens to be a home of a client, which was completely remodeled and redone just 30 years ago, but is a beautiful stone villa overlooking the Tuscan and Umbrian countryside. It's right at the border of those two regions. There's a lot of homes available. The question is how courageous someone is to buy it, and do they have the vision and the skill with which to turn it into their dream so it doesn't become the Tuscan nightmare as opposed to the Tuscan dream. It's a lot of fun. It's a natural extension of what we do. And because I have seen every nightmare situation that you can possibly imagine in purchasing homes at my different times in Italy, I think I can be of great value. My clients think I'm of great value, at least, to help them not deal with some of the real headaches that can happen when you try to do this.
Do they have a historical registered properties like a Green Gables?
Yeah, in America, we have the National Historic Registry, which is more like getting a special gold star. It doesn't keep you from enjoying that property, remodeling it, and really living a normal life and the evolution of a home. So Green Gables, the main house, is a historical landmark, but that doesn't in any way inhibit you from completely remodeling the home, for example. In Italy, we have a similar category called a house that has been placed under the auspices of the Belle Arti, which means the beautiful arts, translated directly. And those are houses that we strongly recommend not to purchase unless you love them exactly the way you find them. Because the Belle Arti, different than America, in Italy, will have to give you permission for anything you do in the home. You want to move a light from the center of the wall to the right-hand side of the wall because you want to hang a painting, not without the Belle Arti permission. You want to change the floor from a stone floor to a hardwood floor because that's your taste, not without the Belle Arti permission. So there are beautiful historic homes in Italy, and historic doesn't just mean old. Historic means historically important because of who lived there or what its significance was in the community. And they can be under the auspices of the Belle Arti. And unless you love them, don't buy them because it'll be an ongoing nightmare.
Wow, sounds tougher in Italy than in US.
Oh, if people are looking for ease of getting things done, efficiency, they should stay in America. But easier and efficient isn't always better. It depends what you're looking for.
You are an avid traveler. Is there another place you would like to visit or live?
Well, I am an avid traveler. I've lived in many parts of the world at different points of my life. My parents did an amazing thing when I was 8 years old, and they brought me and my sisters and my family for 15 months to Europe. And that, when I was 8, is what exposed me to places like Versailles and places like Hadrian's Villa and the fjords of Norway and the castles of the Rhine and so forth and so on, and skiing in the Swiss Alps. So I'm very fortunate. The place I would most like to visit, that I've been there once, but I can't claim to know it at all, would be Japan. My wife was born in Tokyo, so she's half Japanese. She spent her childhood moving back and forth between Tokyo and San Francisco. And so our next big trip planned for next year would be to go to Japan and spend a good period of time there. The fact that she speaks Japanese doesn't hurt also. That it's interesting, the architects for Green Gables, the Green brothers, spent a lot of time in Asia and specifically in Japan. And in many of their homes, it is very clear that they were influenced by Japanese design and culture, which is so beautiful. Green Gables does not show that nearly as much as other properties of the Green brothers. But there are some lanterns hanging over the front entrance and the back terrace door, and a few other touches. If you look at them, you go, I see how there's a Japanese Asian influence in that design. And so there's a connection there as well.
One last question for you. Green Gable is available for people to purchase. Do you feel sentimental about it?
Sentimental. Of course I do. I will continue for, I'm sure, the rest of my life, cherish the incredible memories I've had, and there are so many, of what it meant to be a child and a young adult, and then even a full adult at Green Gables, getting married there, and all those other moments that make the sum of what is a very fortunate life. But if sentimental means sad and forlorn, that this magnificent estate will pass into the hands of someone else, no. I'm the kind of person who only looks forward. And so I'm appreciative of the past and super excited about the future. Hopefully, if one is fortunate, life is made of many chapters. I'm personally ready to close the Green Gables chapter. I do live on the other side of the world, so it makes it easier to say that. So cherish the memories, enjoy the future.
Well, thank you, Marc, very much for all the insights. I really appreciate your time and love all the story you shared.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's fun to talk about this crazy, wonderful place called Green Gables. So thank you.